Around?
Yep.
Hello, this is Sam Arneson. This is the Art Life video blog, and we're on day 156.
I'm Jacob Wolf. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Thank you, Sam, for having me here. It's really a pleasure to meet you. Do you want to tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a caricature artist living and working in Portland here. I do a lot of art as a hobby, sort of on the side, and that's pretty much it. I like motorcycles and boats and snowboarding.
Right on. Yeah. The need for speed.
I guess so. The need for function. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I like the way that things work. So.
Right on.
Yeah.
So when did you first get introduced to art?
That goes way back. My mom's an artist, though I didn't realize it till I was about 12 or 13. I didn't think of her as an artist because she didn't present herself that way. But looking back, she's always fostered the artistic side in me, and in whatever ways that she could. And my older brother was already drawing. He's 4 years older than me, and he was established himself as having a tendency to make art. So it was a very normal and natural part of my life from the very beginning.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so you just started creating art at home?
Yeah. I've always just made things. I'm always interested in how things work, and I've always been interested in replicating things. I tried to make a kite one time when I was 4 years old, and I observed the shape of a kite and everything, and it was held by a string, and that the wind was blowing and everything, but I knew nothing about aerodynamics or anything like that. I had no idea how a kite actually worked, and so I tried to mimic it, and I folded a piece of paper into like a diamond shape, tied a string to it, and just like running with it down the street, And the neighbor kid, that was about 12 years old, kind of stopped me, and he was sort of like an older brother. He was real kind, but he was like, "That's not how a kite works." He was like, "Well, I'll have to show you how a kite works." But I've always done things like that. I've taken radios apart and RC toys. I still have an addiction to buying RC toys. I'll play with them a few times and I take them apart. And I'm just interested in how things work, so I've always been curious.
Right on. So your mother and your brother were some of your early inspirations. Who else have you drawn inspiration from?
Outside of them, I would say that my strongest inspirations come from animation mostly and illustration. Chuck Jones, definitely a huge inspiration. Always been fascinated with animation on both levels. It's like the cartooning level, and also, once again, getting down to like how it works. How do you make a still image look like it's alive? And I've always been a bit preoccupied with that idea of animating inanimate objects. So yeah, like Chuck Jones, probably Norman Rockwell. His illustrations always seemed kind of just super lifelike. They would like really capture a moment, and that always intrigued me. And the way that he would emphasize expressions and still keep his illustrations very lifelike. Like you don't look at them and think like there's a cartoon. That there's a lot of cartooning happening in that in the way that the composition's arranged and their gestures and even their slight changes in their proportions and stuff.
Right on. Did you start drawing cartoons at a young age? Or was it like portraits?
No, I've actually, when it comes to drawing, I've always gravitated more towards cartoons. I always have had a bias toward cartoons. It's always kind of a hard one for me to answer, because a lot of the typical artist questions that I get are difficult for me to answer, because want to go in every direction at the same time. You know, it's
I can
something
relate,
that's
I can relate with you on that.
Yeah, it's intrinsic in my personality, and you know, it's hard. It's hard for me to explain. It's also hard for people to understand. But like sometimes I like to draw really realistic stuff, and sometimes I like to draw really cartoony stuff, and sometimes more abstract, sometimes dark, sometimes light. You know, and in a variety of different styles. And it's actually presented one of my biggest challenges is reining that in long enough to where I could stay with something and make it into something. Um, I kind of got away from what the original question was. Like,
did you start drawing cartoons?
oh yeah. See, it just unfolds. But yeah, you know, I would say the majority of what I've done is cartoons. You know, I guess it probably has a lot to do with why I became a caricature artist. Um,
So do you want to tell us how you got into caricature drawing?
It was quite by accident. I had recently been laid off from a job and at a screen printing place, and I temporarily got a job at Subway while I was looking for something that wouldn't make me want to shoot myself in the head.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom calls me, and she's like, I went to an interview to draw charcoal portraits, pastel portraits at Knott's Berry Farm, and it's not going to work out for me because it's only commission. And she, you know, she needed a guaranteed wage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. Of course, you know, it's way better, you know. So I went from being a sandwich artist to a portrait artist. it was an upgrade, you know.
Right on.
I remember being really happy when I did get hired on, and because I didn't think that I could be an artist for a living. It's the only thing that I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else, but I didn't think that it was actually going to happen. I thought I was just going to have to eke out a living in some crappy job that I hated and be a hobbyist artist.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kind of like winning the lottery in a way, you know. I mean, there were growing pains, learning how to do the caricatures, but it's all been beneficial. It's all been really great.
So you started off doing portraits, like at a little booth?
Yeah. So basically, for anyone that remembers Knott's Berry Farm or is, you know, from the Orange County area, the Knott's Berry Farm used to rival Disneyland, and now when I tell people about it, like so many people like don't even know.
I have no idea
what it is. Okay, so Knott's Berry Farm is it's an amusement park very close to Disneyland. I grew up in Southern California, in that area, and it's just it's smaller. You know, it's got a few roller coasters, and Disneyland used to be smaller too. So they competed. You know, they'd have rivaling advertisements on television and stuff. And you know, I was born in '77. You know, so I was growing up in the early '80s, and you know, Disney hadn't completely dominated yet. I mean, they've always been the top dog, but so anyways, there's this other little amusement park. And they have kind of like a Western theme. It used to be like, it used to be a berry farm, a literal berry farm. It's where boysenberries come from, if I remember correctly. You know, maybe don't quote me on that. But yeah, the Knott family had a berry farm, and Mrs. Knott made these delicious pies, and they attracted so much attention. They started a business and this and that, and eventually they were giving stagecoach rides, and one thing led to another, and grew up into a theme park. But they stayed with the Western theme, and they had it was called Ghost Town where I worked, which is hilarious because nobody walked down that street. But it looked just like, it was the coolest street too, because it looked like a Western town, you know. But there weren't people wanted to go on the roller coasters, you know. But yeah, you walk down this Western street, and there's an actual blacksmith making horseshoes there, and there's a guy on the piano playing the old-timey piano, and a few other things. I can't remember. I think they had like a jail you could take your picture in and stuff like that. And they'd have actors come through occasionally, dressed in Old West costume, and then I was there with a little bow tie and black vest, drawing pastel portraits, which I hated. I hated wearing the little bow tie and the vest. It was awful. Um, but it was worth it. It was worth it because that's really where I got my art education. Because I didn't have the money to go to art school, so being out there and drawing in public, and having the pressure of drawing in public, the judgment of the crowd, and having to produce something in a limited amount of time, it really forces you to get your shit together and like figure out what you're doing, and there's no better, can't speak here, no better way to learn to draw life than from life. So having people sit in front of you and experiencing the real person and drawing them at the same time, natural lighting and everything, and even slight movements and stuff, all that stuff I think helps in kind of mastering the craft.
Did you get fully positive reactions from the crowd and like the people you worked for, or did you have people unhappy yelling at you because they didn't get what they expected?
It's really like all over the place, especially in the beginning, and then it gets more consistent and better as you get better at what you're doing, but I remember, I mean, sometimes I would just make bad mistakes, like amateur mistakes, There's certain like intricacies and like line work and stuff that have always been really important to me, and I've always, strived to have attractive lines in my artwork, not necessarily neat and tidy, but attractive, something that draws your eye around the page that you want to look at, that's interesting, and I don't always hit my mark, but I've always put that at a high priority. And one time I was concentrating so much on that, I was drawing these two girls. So we used to do side profile, where we tell them to look sideways and we draw the profile of their head, which was kind of an odd way to, put two people together, but we draw them like one person here, and I don't know if the camera can see, but like one person here, like looking that way, and then the other person behind them looking that way. So like two people, Okay. And I was drawing these two sisters, and I drew the younger one in back, and because you gotta draw the person in front first, and then the other person overlapping, So I drew the younger girl in back, and I got a really good likeness on her. I was super happy. And then I started drawing the older sister in front of the little sister. And I was like getting a really good likeness, and the drawings coming together. Because like in the early days, it was really like a crapshoot. Like line for line, I didn't know what direction the drawing was going to take. It's like this line could be right, it could be wrong, but you just got to keep moving and drawing. And I draw the older sister about 75% the size of the younger sister. The little sister, she has this giant head, but it's like it's not a humorous drawing. This is a pastel portrait, and it's realistic proportions and sort of serious expressions and stuff. The little girl has like the giant head, and the big sister has this tiny little head in front of her, this tiny little pinhead. And the mom was so confused when I handed it to her. And she was like, it's really good, but it's like, I forget what the girl's name was. She was like, so and so is like so small, like she just looked like a little elf person. So I gave her half off. She was happy. But it was like,
it's artistic.
But it's like, especially in the beginning, like weird stuff like that happens, or you just straight up do a bad drawing, and people react differently. Some people will be nice no matter what. they'll be nice and pay for it no matter what you do, if it's good or bad. And other people, if it's bad, they might not buy it. But then I've discovered more than anything, what really upsets people is some people really are just more concerned that you portray them in an attractive way. It doesn't matter if it looks like them or not. It doesn't. It's almost can work. It can almost work in your to. How do I want to say it? It can be a disadvantage if you make it look too much like some people, just because of their self-image.
Right.
Whether they're unattractive or not, some people just their self-image. If you draw what they are exactly, they won't like it, and there's no way to really know what their self-image is.
Right.
It just kind of plays out and comes out. But I don't know. You gain over time. You gain like an intuitive sense of what works for people. I've got to say, I've got to sort of add this disclaimer to all this: is that these portraits were done as souvenirs at a theme park. They weren't like high brow portraits, so perhaps clientele that are commissioning like an oil painting that would kind of